Let's talk about dating in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. Like I'm sitting here at 43 and oh my God, it is so different from your 20s to your 30s to your 40s. Being a woman at 43, I can tell you now that there's just a level of like maturity that happens as you get older because you do become more aligned with who you are and what you want and what you deserve. This is where you're definitely not settling, not making excuses for people. Like you become very clear and focused on what it is that you want because chances are you've had a lot of what you didn't want. You've had a lot of disappointment, you've had a lot of heartbreak, you've had a lot of things happen that you didn't foresee happening, and you had to learn how to like overcome. That really tough period of life is where you learned who you are and what it is that you want, and you also worked on your self-esteem and self-worth. I think the older you get, especially in your 30s and 40s, you just don't have time for the BS. You know exactly what you want, and it doesn't mean that the pool gets smaller, because I hear this all the time from women and men in their, mid 30s to beyond, is that, oh my God, the pool is so small right now. The pool is actually not small at all, because just because people are married doesn't mean that in your 20s people weren't in relationships. It's the same thing. The pool has gotten smaller because you have gotten more narrow and more in alignment with what it is that you want, and you're not just open and taking anything that comes along. So when you're in your 20s, you have so much going on and you have so many opportunities, but it doesn't mean you don't have those opportunities in your 30s and 40s. They just look a little different. Your 20s are all about you. This is like the time in your life when you're finally, maybe you're out of school, you got your first job, you're really making some money, and you're just completely consumed in your own self and extremely selfish. Don't sit here in your 30s and 40s and go, oh my God, I just missed that phase of life. Yes, I hear you. It was fun. We didn't have any responsibilities. We could just plan a trip to Miami and just go at the drop of a hat. We could do whatever we wanted. We had no real extreme bills. We didn't have any responsibilities. No one waking us up at 5, 6 in the morning because they wanted pancakes and cereal for breakfast. We didn't have to drive to the basketball game. We didn't have to do anything. All we had to do was just focus on what it is that we wanted and what we needed. Totally hear you. Sometimes that sounds absolutely amazing. But would you really want to go back there? Steph in her 20s also overlooked so many red flags. Steph in her 20s had absolutely no idea who she was, what she wanted, or where she was going. She thought she did, but she didn't. Steph in her 20s didn't also know what it feels like to be a mom, to have a really amazing partner, to be truly content and at peace and fulfilled. Even though those periods of selfishness of just being able to be out with my girls and like live my best life sounds amazing at times, would I want to go back there and live that every single day? Absolutely not. Even though I'm stressed at times and consumed and I'm working my tail off and doing all the things, I would not trade this period of my life for anything. So the first golden nugget here is to enjoy each phase of your life. If you're watching this and you're in your 20s, you don't want kids. Maybe you do, but maybe you also understand like, oh my God, I don't want to wake up at 1, 3, 4 in the morning and do a feeding and then have to do this. Like, I just love my life right now. As you should, because that's the phase of life that you're in. Now, the thing with dating in your 20s is I overlooked all the red flags because yes, I was wounded and I didn't really know who I was. But in this day and age, there's so much information out there that you can really be working on yourself in your 20s. Like I've coached so many people in 18 to that 30 range. And I'm like, oh my God, if I would have known this information as young as you are, wow, what a game changer. But I realized aside from just like overlooking red flags and not really knowing who I was, I didn't require so much from a partner that I do now because I had so many options where I could possibly feel filled up. And that's not always a good thing because I didn't always know how to fill myself up. So if I wasn't relying on the partner, I was relying on the parents or the sister or the friend or whoever to kind of come in and like save the day because I didn't know how to do it myself. When you go through your 30s, that is definitely tested. You are tested where you have to learn how to do these things by yourself. Maybe you start living alone for the very first time. Maybe you get married and go through a divorce for the first time and now you're a single parent. And the common like denominator is by yourself. All the times where you are by yourself and you don't come home every night to a bunch of roommates and you have distractions, or you don't have the husband that distracts you, or you don't have the kids that distract you, and you are left to your own devices, this is where you really start learning how to take care of yourself. Not just learning how to like do the laundry and like cook and clean. I'm talking about real wholeheartedly, mentally and emotionally taking care of yourself. Dating in your 20s is more of like an elaborate experience rather than like honing in on what it is that you actually want and deserve. You're not really thinking about long-term commitments, so the requirements for someone that you start dating doesn't really align with long-term commitment. In your 40s, you really know who you are. You have your career established, money's established. Like you are just like coasting now because you did all that work in your 20s and 30s to kind of like get yourself where you start to like float a little bit. And because of that, you have more time to get really focused on the things that actually matter and not the things that in your 20s and maybe even in your 30s thought were important. It doesn't mean that they're not on the list, but they're definitely not at the top anymore. They're more like in the middle towards the bottom-ish. Or even if they are at the top and they've always been at the top, you have them more clearly defined now. In your 20s, you're more spontaneous and fun and go on a whim. In your 30s and 40s, you really do crave more stability. And the reason why you crave more stability and like calmness is because you've experienced the chaos of working your ass off, of going and doing, that now all you want to do is like nest and relax. Whereas in your 20s, you don't have as many responsibilities as your 30s and 40s. And so you don't need to relax because all you ever do is relax. All you ever do is exactly what you want. And so you almost crave working really hard. And that's why you go into your 30s ready to go balls to the wall. It's important to remember that obviously this is not black and white. This is just my own personal experiences. But I will tell you, dating in my 20s just looks so incredibly different than it did in my 30s. Especially right now at 43, I know exactly who I am. I hold no apologies for it. And I also don't get wrapped up in negativity. I have way more self-control over my emotions, over my mental state, because I've really done the work. And I realize that the more I get involved in someone else's stuff, it just drains me, and me comes first in so many aspects of life. Whereas in my 20s, I was constantly just like giving and trying to prove and do and be and just almost like getting like these mini highs. Whereas now there's such a sense of peace and fulfillment. But I think that's just like the course of life that you sometimes have to go through. And obviously this isn't ringing true for anyone who's in their 20s and 30s. Maybe you absolutely have it all figured out. Maybe you have met the love of your life. Maybe you have your dream career. All I'm telling you is that you will change and you will absolutely evolve. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Go find me on social. I'll link everything down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.